guys, we are today here to study basal ganglia. Basal ganglia is a very important topic. So we are for the university and exams of first year first prof MBBS examinations. So let us head towards the introduction about the basal ganglia. So basal, if we need to understand anything, we must break it down and understand. So basal ganglia has two words, basal and ganglia. So first, basal ganglia. Basal means near the base of the brain in CNS. Okay, and ganglia. Ganglia is the collection of nerve cells. Collection of the nerve cells. So here it's type of a misnomer or what, like nucleus and ganglion are interchangeably used somewhere. In periphery, ganglion is the collection of cell bodies, that is gray matter, and nucleus is the same thing in CNS. Okay, so if we combine this, we get near the base of the brain there are some collections of the nerve cells in the white matter. So here comes the definition. Here's the definition. So we can say that basal ganglia is the subcortical mass of gray matter present within the white matter. Okay, so it is the definition. Now here this acts as a relay center. Okay, we are heading towards further. We have to see all the things about this in the further discussion. Basal ganglia are the 5 subcortical masses of gray matter in the white matter. इसमें क्या क्या इंक्लूडेड होता है? Caudate nucleus, putamen, globus pallidus, substantia nigra, and subthalamic nucleus, also known as body of Lewis. And there are further more subdivisions in the globus pallidus. Globus pallidus is externus and internus, stated as GPE and GPI. In substantia nigra, pars compacta, pars reticularis. Okay. And subthalamic nucleus is there, also known as body of Lewis. Caudate nucleus. So further we head, and there is a structure called striatum, which is formed up of both caudate nucleus and putamen. Globus pallidus, GPE and GPI is known as pallidum. Anatomically, we can see that there is the caudate nucleus here. There is a internal capsule and pallidum plus putamen here. Lentiform nuclei कहते हैं इसको, और thalamus. Okay. So connections. If we see connections, the connections of basal ganglia are exclusively from with the motor cortex. It means that motor cortex sends information to basal ganglia sends information to motor cortex. It's the to and fro exchange of the information. पार्ट ऑफ द EPS एक्स्ट्रा पिरामिडल सिस्टम का ये पार्ट है. दिस इज अ पोटेंशियल MCQ. So general considerations, you can say that all efferents enter the striatum. All efferents, that means that's the coming to the all the fibers that are coming to the basal ganglia from motor cortex, basal ganglia. Okay. And all efferents starts from pallidum. GPI से होते हैं. GPI से आगे जाएंगे वाया कर थ्रू वेयर some other structures to the motor cortex. Only fibers coming from the cortex are excitatory. ठीक है. And efferent fibers going ultimately to the cortex is all other are inhibitory. cortex से आने वाला एक्साइटेटरी होगा, कॉर्टेक्स को जाने वाला एक्साइटेटरी होगा, बाकी सारे बीच भी इनहिबिटरी होंगे. ठीक है. Another information that GABA is the inhibitory neurotransmitter released by the inhibitory synapses. Synapses are formed there, and inhibitory synapses are majorly present. And the GABA is the neurotransmitter of these synapses. And yes, most of the synapses use inhibitory synapses have GABA. And now we come to circuits. Circuits are of two types: direct and indirect. Let's see the direct circuit. In this circuit, the motor cortex, that is 6, area number 6, an afferent come here to the striatum, which is excitatory as told earlier. Okay. Now this makes synapse and sends a tract to GPI, which is the striatopallidal projection, which is inhibitory. And here it is another tract, pallidothalamic projection, which relays in thalamus, and thalamus further relays in motor cortex. Now let's understand and solve this circuit. In resting conditions, the corticostriatal tract is inactive. Resting condition means we are not thinking of any movement, and this tract, that is the pallidothalamic tract, is active throughout unless it is inhibited by this striatopallidal projection. This projection inhibits the movement, and so when we think inhibits the movement and does not let us allow to do a movement if we don't think to do so. Okay. Now motor cortex sends signal. We start thinking of doing some movement. Let's say drinking water, or say like having tea when we feel sleepy. Anyway, anything like that. So motor cortex is active now and sends signal to the striatum that a movement is demanded. So it inhibits the GPI through its striatopalliidal projection, it inhibits the pallidothalamic projection, which relates to the centromedian, ventrolateral, and ventroanterior nuclei of thalamus. Now, ventrolateral, ventroanterior, and centromedian nuclei of thalamus, which further facilitates the motor cortex and facilitates the desirable movement. Facilitate the desirable movement. Okay, so this is how the movement is taking place through direct circuit. But there are cases like suppression of some movements are necessary. Some undesirable movements. There are a lot of options to do an action. Like your phone is ringing in the class. Your phone is ringing in the class. There are many options. Like you have to you have to pick up the phone and talk. This might not be appropriate because teacher might get angry on you. So there are a lot of options, but selecting the correct option and inhibiting the other options is still a task for us. So let us see this always so okay, so let us see the indirect circuits which take care of inhibition of the desirable movements. So cortex. So there is why indirect? Why we say this as an indirect circuit? Because it has some additional structure to the direct circuit. Okay. Now cortex. Cortex sends the signals to the striatum then to GP to subthalamic nucleus, subthalamic to GPI to thalamus to cortex. So let us solve the circuit now. Here the GPE here as and when we start to think to do an inappropriate movement, there is a excitation through the corticostriatal projection, which activates the GPE, the striatopalliidal projection of indirect circuit, which ends in GPE. Now this further goes to the subthalamic nucleus, and then subthalamic nucleus then excites the GPI. GPI inhibits the thalamic nucleus, and hence inhibited, so the movement is not facilitated. Okay. So subthalamic nucleus. So there is a term called reciprocal inhibition. This is an example of reciprocal inhibition. First GP to subthalamic nucleus, then subthalamic nucleus to pallidum. Back. This is called reciprocal nucleus. Pallidum to the subthalamic nucleus. To and fro supply. The function here is to inhibit the undesirable movements, keeps check on the direct circuit when should not be intense, when movement should not be intense. Okay, nice. Now there are 5 parts. We have discussed about the 4 parts. Okay, so 5th part is substantia nigra. Substantia nigra do not have any direct role in the direct or indirect circuit. That is डायरेक्ट रोल नहीं होता है, इनडायरेक्ट रोल होता है. Modulates the activity of striatal neurons in direct and indirect circuits. Cortex. So here we see the direct and indirect circuits, how the substantia nigra modifies. Here's the cortex direct circuit. For direct circuit a neuron is there, and for indirect circuit there is another neuron. Okay, this simple we have discussed about. And the substantia nigra and okay, now this is the modifier of the response. Substantia nigra further there are further relates to the direct and indirect circuit. The striatal neurons. Okay, so they are dopaminergic neurons. Okay, now dopamine has 5 receptors: D1, D2, D3, D4, D5. Here only D1 and D2 receptors are present in the nigrostriatal projections. Excitatory होता है D1 and D2 is inhibitory. Okay, inhibitory, excitatory. Now, as substantia nigrostriatal projections to the direct circuit is excitatory, and to the indirect circuit is inhibitory. Okay, nigrostriatal projections are dopaminergic. Okay, I've told you this. D2 receptors are inhibitory, D1 are excited. So D1 projection end on striatal neurons involved in direct circuit function. It facilitates the selected movement that is facilitated by direct circuit. Okay, and D2 dopaminergic neurons projections end on striatal neurons involved in indirect circuit function. This inhibition results in facilitation. So function क्या हुआ इसका? That disinhibition results in facilitation. Disinhibition किसका हुआ? Disinhibition of these indirect circuits inhibition, and excitation of direct circuit causes elicited response. Okay, now we can say if these are inhibited, facilitation is high. Okay, so why there must be elicited undesirable movements. But no, undesirable movements are not elicited by inhibition of indirect pathway, as there is another internal circuit. So we need to understand that the substantia nigra is not any independent structure which has its own consciousness, which contributes to consciousness. It's just connected to the cortex. Cortex tells it about to modify, send its suggestion according to the past memory. Okay, so there is a cortex which further another projection from the cortex which relays in the substantia nigra, which tells the substantia nigra about the about which movement to elicit or not. Okay, lesion of, so if facilitation is not done, It's called bradykinesia. Movements are reduced in case of bradykinesia. Okay. So basal ganglia. Conclude the uh, let us conclude the functions.